Hello world, good morning, namaste, and Nisam Bulavinaka from Sydney, Australia. What a pleasure it is to be back on the airwaves by the power of Facebook and YouTube. I am Sashi Singh, the host of Sashi Singh's Talking Point. Our last program on SSTP was on 24th December 2022, the night the government in Fiji changed and the coalition government was sworn in by the power of one vote. SSTP has been away for 316 days, watching and observing the machinations of government. During that time, I've had my personal struggles as well, looking after my mother, who unfortunately passed away last August, just a bit over 2 months ago. I thank those in the SSTP community who send their messages of condolences. To all of you in the SSTP community who did so, thank you very much. A big Vinaka Vakalevu and Dhanyavad to you. Well, SSTP this time around is in a brand new format. Get used to it, as it will only be an hour-long program. You blink and you'll miss the program. Wherever you are today, I hope you are well settled in and ready for this episode, number 52. Let's get on with the program. Before I continue, though, an important announcement. Sashi Singh's Talking Point recognizes that questioning, constructive arguments, and opinions are part of conversation, but posts with aggressive, personal attacks, profanity, name-calling, swearing, defamatory in nature, and/or threatening will be removed immediately, and the offenders will be blocked from being part of the SSTP program. I hope that's clear. Let's all observe the rules and enjoy the program. I request that today, as we go right around the world by the wonders of Facebook Live and YouTube Live, that you please share the SSTP page on your own timelines so that we may share the interview with our chief guest with as many people as possible. And to ensure that you receive instant notifications for all future programs, please like the SSTP page and follow us if you can. The good news is that Nikhil Singh, my colleague in SSTP and a founding member, is joining us once again. Well, Nikhil, it has been a while. Welcome to episode 52.
Thank you, Sashi. As always, good to be with you.
Well, let's begin the new format with a quick recap of what is making the big headlines in Fiji. Let us not forget that we have the Deputy Prime Minister, Professor Biman Prasad, as our chief guest today, and I have a number of questions for him. Let's start off, Nikhil. Former Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama and suspended Police Commissioner Sitiveni Giliho were acquitted by the Magistrates Court last month. They both had been charged with serious criminal offences. The matter, I believe, is now heading back to court. Why is that?
Sashi, Bainimarama was charged with one count of attempt to pervert the cause of justice, while Giliho was charged with one count of abuse of office. This after they were alleged to have interfered in a police investigation into claims of financial mismanagement at the University of the South Pacific by senior university executives. What's happened, Sashi, is the acting DPP, John Rambuku, has filed an appeal against the acquittal. They were acquitted by the Suva Magistrates Court, but now that's why this matter is heading back to the court. The state has filed 8 grounds of appeal and reserves the right to amend, add, or delete any grounds of appeal at the receipt of the court record. The notice of appeal against the acquittal was filed at the Suva High Court on Thursday, Sashi. This is how it was reported in Fiji Village.
All right, and sticking with the relationship between the People's Alliance and its coalition partners, there has been some exchange of fire between the Prime Minister and his Education Minister and Sodelpa MP Aseri Randrontro. What's happening there?
Well, this really stems from the cabinet reshuffle announcement by the PM, or at least the attempted reshuffle. I am sure you will canvass this with your guests today, Sashi, but in a recent Fiji Village program, Straight Talk, Prime Minister Rambuka effectively said that he had warned his Education Minister, Aseri Randrontro, to lift his performance. And if he doesn't, then he will be removed from cabinet. Now, Rodondro is a Sadelpa MP, and as we know, they are in a power sharing arrangement with Rambuka. In response to the threat of losing his cabinet seat, Rodondro said, and I quote, "The Prime Minister's comments can only happen if Sadelpa agrees to such a situation where it would have to first determine his performance." And then he delivered this message, which I found to have a subtle warning, Sashi. Rodondro said, and I quote again, "As it stands, he hopes that everyone will uphold the coalition agreement and lead without malice." So warning shots have been fired within the same camp, Sashi. Will the collateral damage result in the flattening of this three-party government? Time will tell.
Indeed, and Nikhil, once the backbone of Fiji's economy, the sugar industry has been on life support for well over a decade now. The coalition government has, however, brought a smile on the faces of the hard-working farmers in the industry. How has this come about?
You're right, Sashi. The industry is still on life support, and a lot of efforts have been made by the current government to revive, if you like, look at programs of diversification. But the great news for sugarcane farmers is that they will be receiving a historic record payment of $91.38 per tonne in total for the 22 cane season. In last week's cabinet announcement, Prime Minister Rambuka stated that farmers' accounts would be topped up by $5 per tonne, resulting in a final payment of $6.12 per tonne. He says the final wash-up payment will be made before the 31st of October this year, which has just passed. That is indeed good news for the farmers, Sashi.
Well, that's the news highlights from Fiji. Nikhil Singh, once again, thank you very much for your contribution today. Now, let me just tell our viewers, Nikhil will be back at the back end of the program once we have finished with our chief guest, and I'll be talking to you pretty soon, within the hour, Nikhil. Thank you for your contribution today.
Thanks, Sashi. Look forward to the program.
Thank you very much. Well, you are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live. We ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. As I say, Fijians want to know. Please like and follow the SSTP page if you have not done so. Now it is time to meet our chief guest on Sashi Singh's Talking Point. He really needs no introduction and has appeared on SSTP on 3 previous occasions. I thank him for readily accepting our invitation to come on today's program. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance in Fiji and the leader of the National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad. Welcome to SSTP once again. Good morning from Sydney. Good afternoon in Fiji. Nisam Bulavinaka, sir. Welcome.
Bulavinaka and namaste to you, Shashi and Nikhil. It's good to see both of you back. and if I can just right at the outset, thank you and Nikhil as well, and SSTP for giving us, when we were in opposition, real opportunity as an independent, well thought out program and questions which we did not have the opportunity for a long time as opposition, given the draconian media decree and the government-funded propaganda that we saw for many years. So I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the government to thank your role in providing space to those who believed in democracy and those who wanted to end dictatorship. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to be back on your show.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. On that very same note, I wish you could take it a step further and get your other colleagues in the coalition government to at least come and talk about their policies, talk about the programs for the people of Fiji, and be part of SSTP. We're here for the people of Fiji, so I hope you can take that on board.
I'm sure this is a government, Sashi, which is open, transparent. It's a cabinet government where ministers independently have the capacity and the ability to talk about their respective ministries and policies and the implementation and what has been done so far. So I'm sure many of them would take the opportunity to talk to you, as they do to the free media here in Fiji now.
All right, sir, let's move on since time is of the essence. This is a new 1-hour format of SSTP now. Let me get straight to our Q&A. How would you describe the marriage between the three coalition partners alliance after close to 1 year in government?
Well, Shashi, as you know, coalition governments throughout the world, some of them are very, very successful. Coalition governments have their own challenges. You know, you have experience of coalition governments in Australia. I remember once, an independent member decided, who formed the government. New Zealand has very similar experiences. They're on the verge of, again, forming a three-party coalition government. Coalition governments have their own challenges. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it can be challenging. But, coalition governments also provide the transparency, the accountability. There is internal, accountability itself. And so at the end of the day, coalition governments can be very good for the country and for Fiji, after 16 years of dictatorial rule and two-man government. This is a breath of fresh air. We now have freedom. We now have not only freedom for people generally, but freedom for the media. And of course, coalition governments, we are three-party government. Initially, it was PA and FP that went into a pre-election arrangement. Then after the election, we had Sudelpa come on board. And overall, I can say with confidence that the coalition is strong. We are together in taking this country forward, despite all the challenges and the issues that we inherited after 16 years. And so I can say that the coalition is very strong, led by a very experienced politician and former prime minister and leader of the opposition. And some of us, having sat in opposition for 8 years, sometimes it's better to be in opposition first before you come into government, because you can see things in proper perspective as well.
All right, well, let us look at promises versus delivery. Prior to elections 2022, in the lead-up campaign, there were many promises made. The coalition government is now nearing 1 year in office. How successful has the government been in delivering on its promises? Was not the increase in VAT a broken promise?
Let me just, Shashi, thank you for that question. I know this is just a 1 hour program, but let me start by saying the first promise we made was to end dictatorial rule. The first promise we made was to bring back democracy. The first promise we made was to restore media freedom. And if you look at what we have done in the last 10 months, immediately after we came into government, the day the Prime Minister was sworn in, next day he lifted the ban on Professor Brijlal and his wife for her to bring his ashes back. Immediately after that, we lifted the ban on the Vice Chancellor of the University of the South Pacific. We announced that we will restore the university's funding. And this was like within, hours and days. We obviously, when the parliament met, we made sure that we repealed the Draconian Media Act so that the media is free. We had promised a new style of governance. We said we will consult, we will have dialogue. We started with a National Economic Summit. We started by appointing a fiscal review committee. We started by bringing people together. As soon as we went through this summit, the Prime Minister, as he had promised, we restored Girmit as a national holiday. we restored Ratu Sukuna Day as a public holiday. But more importantly, Sashi, we had promised that we will look after our vulnerable. The rumors, the lies, the deceit that was spread before the election that the new coalition government would not look after the vulnerable. Immediately after we got into government, we identified funding, the wastage. We allocated $50 million, and we paid 223,000 students before they started the school at the beginning of this year, $200 each. And we helped 223,000 students, recognizing the fact that people were still transitioning from low income, loss of jobs after COVID. Beyond that, Sashi, we can talk about the budget, how important the budget was, how we balanced it, how we are still looking after our people, and there are a number of things that I can highlight that we have delivered so far beyond just the style of governance and what we have done so far.
I'll be asking you a lot more questions on
Sure.
on your portfolio as the Minister for Finance, which now brings me to the point. Let's look at austerity measures. Austerity measures are considered harsh economic policies intended to reduce the government's budget deficit. These policies can include reductions in government spending and increased taxes. If I may ask you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, what belt-tightening measures did you, as Minister for Finance, bring in?
A very important question, but let me just start by saying that the word austerity may not be the appropriate word, in terms of how we formulated the budget. But what we did, Sashi, was immediately when we got into government, we put a stop to the wastages. In fact, the boat was leaking when we inherited the government. When we came into government, for example, we realized that the Fiji Roads Authority had spent all its whole year's budget in 6 months. In December, there was no money left. On top of that, we had $42 million that FRA owed to the contractors. So what we did immediately was to put a stop to the wastages. We identified, $150 million. We redeployed funding from the existing budget, and we were able to help our students allocate $50 million there, redeploy funds where we could help people before the budget. Now, let me come to the budget and your use of the word austerity. We inherited a huge, huge debt level. So essentially, what we did, as we promised, was to immediately bring down a budget which will control the deficit. So we moved from an average deficit of about 9% to an average of about 4.8%. We brought in tax measures. We made sure, and in fact, people have forgotten that the previous government had had a VAT rate of 15%. They reduced it to 10%. And then after COVID, before the 2022 election, they brought 3 rates, and one was 0 on 21 basic food items, which we had propagated for many years when we were in opposition. They brought a 9% VAT and a 15% VAT. It was cumbersome. It was not bringing government the kind of revenue that we needed. So we streamlined the tax. We maintained the 0 VAT on all 21 items. We added one additional item, which is basic medicine. And we made sure that we had only 2 rates. Now, what that means, Sashi, is that we were able to raise $500 to $600 million additional revenue. And you look at what we did with that revenue. We increased the budget substantially for our health ministry. We increased the budget for the social welfare. We increased social welfare benefits by 15% and 25%. We provided additional funding to the agriculture ministry, subsidies for dalo farmers, rice farmers, ginger farmers, and cassava farmers, which was not there before. So, and I can go on and on about the number of measures that we were able to put into the budget. So it was not an austerity measure in the way that austerity measures are taken where you would cut expenditure, particularly social welfare, health, education. For education, we allocated the highest budget. And one of the most important things that we did, because we recognized the burden that 53,000 families, particularly those from poor families, were put on. All of them were paying their student debt. So we wrote off, forgave $650 million, lifted the burden on 53,000 families, and that income is now going into the pockets of those families, because we recognize that people were struggling after COVID, and going into 2023, we would be able. And so the budget, addressing the fiscal side of our measures, we were also able to help the people. But let me just tell you one more fact. In this year's budget alone, we are paying principal plus interest, a sum of $1 billion a year in just debt repayment. And we have managed to reduce the deficit, bring the debt level to about 80% of GDP, which is still very, very high. And it'll take several years before we can address that. So the budget that we produced was not an austerity budget, but it was a budget which cut out the wastages, which provided a balance between supporting economic growth and looking after our people. And we have done that very, very carefully. We've had wide acceptance of the budget, not only in Fiji, but throughout the world and amongst our international partners and communities.
Professor Prasad, the time is an hour, and I'd like you to please be brief, but make your points. Now, you've mentioned about cutting down on wastage, etc. Let me ask you a question that is very basic.
Sure.
What is the reality of the increase in VAT from 9 to 15%? This kind of measures on the average man on the street. People have been writing into me. One of the main concerns is the cost of living. The majority are hurting daily. Let me give you an example. Someone wrote in and said that a 500-gram packet of butter costs Fijian $12.50, for instance. In comparison, here in Sydney, a 500-gram packet of butter costs $6 to $8. As the Minister for Finance, sir, what do you say to the people to address their dire situation? What effect has your measures had on the majority of the population?
Shashi, that's a very good question. In fact,
it's a bread and butter question.
It's a bread and butter question. And let me just also take you back. When we were in opposition, we talked about what happened for 10 years when the previous government had provided this 32% protection to one particular company which was importing milk powder at a zero rate and converting them into butter and other products and selling them at a price. So some of the prices that we see at the moment today are legacy issues. What I want to give you is just a very quick, I know we don't have much time. I have a lot of detail to actually explain what is happening. Not all prices as a result of the 15% VAT, and on some of the services and some of the items, VAT rate of 15% was already there, so there is no price change there. The Commerce Commission report to me just last week, from a survey of 232 product prices, a total of 40% of the review resulted in the decrease in prices. For example, milk powder price reduction for all the products. We had put measures within the budget. Soybean, canola oil price reduction. We had reduced duty on canned fish. We had reduced duty on meat items. And if you look at the prices of some of the items after the budget and the measures that we have taken, the prices have actually gone down. I agree, some of the prices have gone up. Butter would be an example that you pointed out. And some of these prices were raised, Sachi, during COVID. The freight cost had gone up very, very significantly, 3 or 4 times. And so as the freight costs are coming down, some of these prices that are still very high, because some of these prices are determined purely by what's happening in the international market, because we are importing them. So my expectation is that some of these prices that were raised exorbitantly because of freight costs, not because of taxes here in Fiji, with the decline in the freight cost that we see, and it has already happened, we expect some of those product prices to come down further. But the budgetary measures that we put in has brought down the prices of a number of items, as I pointed out of a survey of 232 products, 40% show that the prices have actually come down. So if we compare what was there immediately after COVID, what has happened now in the last 6 or 7 months, or at least in the last 3 months after the budget, some prices are still very high. But overall, we believe that the measures in the budget and what the surveillance that we are trying to do through the Commerce Commission, we're looking at other prices, that overall, we have managed the situation very well compared to some other countries, including Australia and New Zealand, I guess, when you look at the price.
You've painted a picture.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, what do you say to the man on the street who is struggling? They complain about the cost of living. A simple message to the man on the street, Professor Prasad.
The simple message is this, Sashi. We recognize that some prices are still very high. But as I said in the budget, when we came in, immediately we provided the $200 to all the children, 223,000, because we wanted to add the support, because we recognize that people's budget are stretched. Then we looked at the budget. We immediately made sure that we increased the social welfare allowances. All other poverty-related assistance, child allowance, family assistance allowance have all been increased. We have made sure that we increase the subsidy for kidney dialysis. We have put in medicine as part of the list of zero-rated VAT. So instead of 21 items. So in the budget, while we recognize that people's income may have been reduced, in fact, in the budget, we did not touch the income tax threshold. So all those people who are earning below 30,000 are not paying any taxes, because we recognize that they needed support. So I want to say to the ordinary men and women on the street, yes, we recognize life was very difficult immediately after COVID. I know I've gone around the country, I talked to the people. We recognize this just recently, as Nikhil said quite rightly. We recognize that farmers were also struggling, particularly sugarcane farmers. And the government has decided to top up. Government is putting $8.2 million, resulting in the highest ever cane price in the history of sugarcane farming in this country. So if you put all those measures together, Shashi, we recognize and we appreciate, when people say that there are some prices which have gone up. But equally, as I said, as I pointed out, the list of products, the key ones, basic food items, still has zero VAT. We are also making sure that we monitor, we provide proper surveillance, so that unscrupulous traders, and some of them did that immediately after the budget. They increased the price of the chicken when they shouldn't have. So all these things is being done as part of a government strategy to help our people, and particularly those who are vulnerable. And let me add, we've also announced that for next year again, we will provide $200 each to all the students whose parental income is less than 50,000, and we are going to help more than 220,000 students again in January, when we pay out $200 each.
Give you credit for that. A very quick question, and I want a quick answer, because I have a lot of subjects to cover.
Sure.
When you were in opposition, you were mooting a national wage of $5 an hour, etc. now that you're in government and you control the purse strings of the country, is the coalition government giving any thought of increasing wages in the near future?
Shashi, as I said, we had suggested this in 2018 as part of our manifesto that the minimum living wage should be around $5. This was about 6 years ago. Obviously, COVID created new imperatives, new circumstances. What we find, and this is a positive thing, while we have a challenge of losing a lot of skills to Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, we've also seen that our economy has performed very, very strongly. In fact, we are expecting 8 or even more than 8% growth this year. Tourism numbers are back to 2019, in fact, more than 2019 level. Our remittances are holding very, very strongly. We expect about $1.2 billion this year. What has that meant, Shashi, is that the labor market is very buoyant. In fact, the assessment that we've made now, salaries and wages have increased by about 25% in the last 8 or 9 months. So the circumstances itself is pushing wages. The economic growth is very strong. Jobs are being created. And so that's helpful. But as I also announced, answer to your question directly, the government has already announced a review of the current minimum wage. The processes are being put in place, and there will be a wide consultation on the appropriateness of, we already have $4. And I'm pretty sure that, what we said in 2018, could be achieved as quickly as possible or even more, because the circumstances itself, as I said, has shown that the wages and salaries have increased by 25% already.
So you'll have consultation and things before an announcement is made about wages?
Absolutely. Because that is important. That's what we said in 2018, contrary to the lies that we are going to just unilaterally bring a minimum wage of $5 in 2018. No, we said we will do it progressively. We will do it through consultation. Circumstances have drastically changed. And as I said, the wages and salaries have already increased by about 25%. We have to reassess that. We have to review that. We have to consult the employers, various parties, and then come to a proper and well-meaning, what I call a living minimum wage for the country.
You are watching Shashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance and leader of the National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad. Please like and follow the SSTP page, and if you can share the page as well, I'll be most grateful. Professor Prasad, Deputy Prime Minister, I now turn to board appointments. Prior to the 2022 elections, just about every politician who came on SSTP, they were all very, very critical of the Fiji First Party and their appointments on boards. The word that comes to mind is nepotism, cronyism. People were expecting change, but did they get that change? Practically, a lot of people are saying it's the same old practice of the previous government. Some appointed under the former government have been reappointed. Others have been appointed along party lines. What can you say about board appointments under the coalition government? Were the appointments based on merit, sir?
Well, Shachi, people can have different interpretations, and the same people, who were not saying anything with respect to, nepotism and cronyism, are now basically assessing the appointments. There are obviously differences of opinion, but I can tell you some of the appointments that I have made and the Prime Minister has made. If you just look at the chairpersons of some of the board, you look at the chairperson of the FDB board, you look at the appointment that I've made, chairperson of Fiji Airways board, chairperson of FRCS, somebody like, Malakai Neyangar, the chairman of the FRA. So people can have their interpretations. There are some people who have been appointed on the board who have had political affiliations. You know that we have a three-party coalition, and one of the agreements that we've had with one of our coalition partners is that certain positions, certain allocations in the board, ambassadorial appointments, these are part of the agreement. So, as I said earlier, this is a coalition government. There is an agreement. This is not just a PA-NFP government. And there are challenges with respect to board appointments. But I can tell you that as far as I'm concerned, I can see a lot of merit, even if those who had some political affiliation to the three parties in government are people who are meritorious, people who can make a difference. Of course, we can argue, about the merits and demerits of who is there on what board. Generally, what I've seen, what I have done for my boards that come under my ministry, we have made sure that there is a pool. If you have 5 board members, 6 board members, of course you would have a diversity of people, and the skills will range from one spectrum to another. But yes, I think merit is still the overwhelming consideration in these appointments.
All right, if you say so. Now, Professor Prasad, prior to the 2022 elections, the then opposition parties were making a lot of noise about carrying investigations into several massive scams that had taken place under the watch of the Fiji First reign. Some that come to mind, for instance, is the $33 million Water Authority digger scam, the $12 million Lautoka swimming pool scam. What progress has been made to investigate and prosecute those that committed fraud and abused power? Has anything been done on this front, sir?
Sashi, as you know, these investigations take time. They require a lot of expertise. It's for example, the Walesi investigation, as my colleague, Deputy Prime Minister Kumkamida announced, that's still going on. There are investigations with respect to a number of organizations, and these could be audit investigations. The Minister for Sugar, for example, has talked about the FICAC investigation on the former CEO of the Fiji Sugar Corporation. So some of these complaints were there. There are a number of areas where investigations are continuing and will be done. So all those people, who have, broken laws, would be taken to task in an appropriate manner and in a transparent and open manner as well.
All right. One very notable feature of the coalition government has been the number of government ministers making overseas trips. The public perception is that on every parliamentary break, instead of the elected MPs visiting the electorate or the electorate, they're off on another trip overseas. It's a state of affairs that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects. Now, do you, as Minister of Finance, see the irony in this? On the one hand, expecting people to tighten their belts, and on the other hand, ministers going on what the public term as junkets. What's your comment to that, sir?
So, Sashi, there are two aspects to overseas travel by ministers. Obviously, this is a new government. There is a lot of, in fact, the level of heightened engagement, international engagement that this government is experiencing from our international partners, donors, and the cooperation and support that we are getting is unprecedented. So there are places where the ministers are required to attend. Some is representing, Fiji. So for example, if I'm invited to the World Bank, IMF annual meetings, I go there as the country's representative on the board of the World Bank and the IMF, where I am supposed to speak, where I, have to be part of the panel. I was, for example, chairing the Commonwealth Finance Ministers meeting in Morocco, this, so I had to be there. And similarly, the Prime Minister has to make important state visits, attend important meetings. But people who are very harsh about the coalition government's travel have forgotten that some of the standards, in terms of salaries and allowances, which we are reviewing anyway, was set up by the previous government. And we don't want to go in the past and dig out and say, you were claiming this much and, you spend this much. That's not what we are trying to do. But I take the point, and I've said this publicly, that I think beyond this year, as the Honorable Prime Minister has already said publicly, that the extent of travel, may not be as much as when a new government comes in the first 6 or 9 months. Obviously, there are meetings where ministers don't have to go. They can be represented by the permanent secretaries, or they can be represented by high commissioners and ambassadors. So, we are obviously, and we are not immune to criticism. We do take the people's concerns. I think sometimes, in some specific trips, those criticisms would have merit. But I think some of the judgment is a bit too harsh, in terms of the new government's engagement that is required in representing the country.
Well, that's the people's perception, and I guess at the end of the day, that's what really matters, how they perceive things. You mentioned, I don't like going back, but you just mentioned the previous administration. Now, which brings me to an interesting point. Prior to the elections of 2022, the opposition parties collectively, just about all of them, were very, very critical of Bainimarama's $3,000 a day per diem on overseas trips. Can you just answer this very simply, sir?
Sure.
Is this per diem of $3,000 still being paid to the current Prime Minister?
The per diem rate is still the same, Shashi, but the Prime Minister has publicly announced, and we're taking a motion into the next sitting of Parliament, where the allowances will be reduced, and we will get you the details when that motion goes through the Parliament.
All right, I'll wait for that. Now, Deputy Prime Minister, when the memorandum of understanding was entered into between the People's Alliance, the National Federation Party, and SODELPA to form the coalition, the expectation of the people was that at the very least there will be consultation between the leaders on major issues of governance. However, it is now obvious that the Prime Minister, Mr. Rambuka, has been making what he terms his captain's call on some major issues. Are you concerned about the lack of the consultative process between the three leaders in the coalition?
Well, Sashi, very important question. And as I said at the beginning, the Prime Minister is the leader and the Prime Minister of the coalition government of three parties that we've agreed. The cabinet ministers, the caucus, we have a collective responsibility in cabinet, in government. And so there are internal mechanisms. I mean, I don't go out every time I'm unhappy about something in the coalition arrangement. I don't go out to the media and express my dissent. That does not mean that we don't. I think the Prime Minister is a very consultative man. He does consult on most occasions. We have a system where the three leaders of the party, we meet. In fact, after the cabinet reshuffle, issues, we had a very productive meeting between the three leaders, and we've set a process where our consultation will be much more regular. But as the Prime Minister of the coalition parties, the Prime Minister does have the responsibility to express, certain opinions, express, his own idea about policies, and we have to. The coalition has to be managed. The Prime Minister himself, has handled the reshuffle. He's made the decision that the status quo will remain because issues were raised. But as I said, going forward, we have to manage this better. We have to have a process where it works on a more sustained basis. And I'm confident that given the leadership of the SODELPA leader, Deputy Prime Minister Gavoka, Prime Minister himself, and myself, we are very confident that we can avoid some of this perception of non-consultation within the coalition. As you said, perception is very important, and we have to manage that as well.
Well, on that basis of the captain's call, let me look at the recent voting at the United Nations. Fiji's government has come under fire over its decision to vote against a United Nations resolution calling for humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza-Israeli conflict. The non-binding resolution, of course, was passed by the UN with 120 countries backing it, 14 countries voting against it, Fiji included. Even President Joe Biden has now called for a humanitarian pause in the conflict. My first question on this subject, Professor Prasad, is, did the NFP have any idea about the way that Fiji was going to vote?
No, we didn't. And we have, as a party, expressed publicly our opposition to the vote that Fiji took. And we have not only publicly stated that we don't agree with that, we have also expressed this to the Honorable Prime Minister as the leader of the coalition party. And the Prime Minister has accepted, our party's position. And that's where we leave the matter.
But does it concern you that on such a divisive issue, there was no consultation with the other leaders, with you?
As I said, Shashi, I have expressed my opinion to the Honorable Prime Minister. The party has expressed its public position, and that's how we're going to deal with the issue.
All right, I'll leave your party's position aside. Considering the unilateral decision taken by the Prime Minister on the UN vote, for example, do you think this has divided Fiji as a nation along ethnic lines?
I don't think so. I think there is too much propaganda by the very same people who never wanted to talk about race, and those who were advising the previous government are now talking about race. As a party on a party's principal position historically on the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict. The NFP has made a very clear, public position. I, as Deputy Prime Minister within the government, I have expressed my views to the Honorable Prime Minister, and that's how I'm going to deal. As I said, I don't, as a leader of the NFP and as Deputy Prime Minister, I understand the collective responsibility. That doesn't mean that when we are unhappy about certain issues or policies within the coalition, we don't say this. Contrary to those who want to make it that we do not have robust discussion within the coalition. We have a cabinet where every policy is debated, is discussed, and so there are other mechanisms where the political parties have a forum to express and advocate a particular policy. But at the end of the day, Shashi, we have to remember that this is a government of three parties. This is a coalition government. And you look at what happens in coalition governments in other countries. Look at New Zealand. If one understands the kind of negotiations that go behind the scenes, even when the government is formed. So it is not easy. It is challenging. I admit that. But to say that a particular party is silent or particular party is complicit, particular party or leader, is not expressing the views. We want to govern for the whole country. We have been left with a mess that we have to deal with, and we can't be squabbling about petty issues out there in the media and in the public. So all I want to say to the people of this country, and to all those who want to bring race into every discussion about what the NFP does or what I do as a deputy prime minister, is in fact bogus. We are a principal party. We are in government to run the country, and we want to do the best for our people, and we'll do it for everyone.
Professor Prasad, I beg to differ. The issue of the Israeli conflict is not a petty issue, but I'll move on, sir.
No, I didn't mean, Sachi, to correct you. I didn't mean. I had shifted from that particular issue.
Okay, all right.
On the Palestinian-Israeli issues, we have made a very, very clear position as a party. And as I told you earlier, I have also expressed my opinion, to the Prime Minister as to what I feel as Deputy Prime Minister and as a party. So that was a separate issue.
All right.
What I mean is, other issues that people are talking about, all over, and especially those who are in opposition to the government.
All right. Moving on. The clock tells me we've got 8 minutes. I still have a few more questions left for you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. Quickly, another international statement that called on China to end its persecution of the Uyghur and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, underlying the superpower's leverage over Pacific Island countries. A total of 51 countries backed that statement that was issued in mid-October by the UN Committee on Human Rights Violations. Now, the Fijian government said Fiji attaches great value to its bilateral relations with the People's Republic of China, and based on its policy of non-interference, has withdrawn Fiji's vote. My question to you, what is your position on China's record of large-scale arbitrary detention and other abuses such as torture, forced abortions, family separations, forced labor, etc.? Your views.
Very clear, Sashi. My view and my party's view, and my view as Deputy Prime Minister, we condemn all abuses of human rights anywhere. And that's the position that I would take personally. I would take as Deputy Prime Minister. I would take as the leader of the NFP. As I said, that when a particular decision is made by the government, and in this case, it is about taking out Fiji from this list, that's something that we will have to discuss and understand why it was done. But let me say this very clearly. Our party's position is we condemn any kind of human rights violations anywhere.
All right, sir, moving on. As time is of the essence, as they say, over the last year, the coalition government, the RFMF, through its commander, Major General Chone Kaluni-Wai, has issued warnings or cautions to government. The first was just after you'd won government on 17 January. Since then, there have been a number of utterances from Nambua that can be perceived as warnings. Most of these are on government adhering to the 2013 Constitution and the rule of law. How concerning is this on the coalition government?
Well, Sashi, if I can just take a little time to make my point. I mean, we have a history in this country of military intervention and coups. And so anything that comes from the military or any comments from the commander will always invoke, perceptions, interpretations. Of course, the 2013 Constitution explicitly states the role of the RFMF and the interpretation that people make of that is, of course, an issue itself. However, we feel that the points of views expressed by the commander would be appropriately discussed with the Minister for Home Affairs, and I'm sure the commander understands the implication of some of these statements, and I also understand that the Honorable Minister for Home Affairs always has good discussions with the commander, and we as a government, we are focused on creating confidence. It's very important for our economy. I think there is already a sense of freedom, confidence, exuberance. If you look at, and so any statement from anywhere, including from the military, will always be analyzed, will always be, debated as to what it means, for the country, for the confidence. And that's what I would be concerned as Minister for Finance, because we work very hard everywhere to ensure that we create confidence. We make sure that people do not create perception. And there are many people out there, who propagate these lies and perceptions about what the military will or will not do. And I think they do more damage than the statements themselves.
Thank you, Professor Prasad. I may just excuse myself for about 10 seconds, sir. Administrators, can you immediately remove Ritesh Singh or Singh Ritesh? Ritesh, you're an imbecile. I said right at the beginning of this program, there will be no vulgarity on my program, on my platform. Administrators, please take him out, whoever he is pretending to be. Thank you, sir. Now, I sit back here and often I shake my head. Something seems fundamentally wrong to me with regards to Fiji when it comes to appointments to high office. For instance, the Fiji Law Society, much to its credit, had to raise its concerns about the PM's reshuffling of the post of the Attorney General. The replacement Attorney General did not have the credentials to take that seat because of disciplinary findings against him in the past. Similarly, appointments of the acting DPP, some members of the judiciary, etc., has been made contrary to the laws. Does this not bring the judiciary, for instance, into disrepute and undermine the rule of law in Fiji?
Well, Shashi, I have to be careful what I say about the judiciary. But what I can say is that the Honorable Prime Minister, said it publicly, and it's a credit to him, that he has listened to the views of the Fiji Law Society. He has listened to the views expressed by coalition partners, and obviously he's decided to keep the status quo. And I think it speaks volumes about the style and the ability of the coalition government to absorb criticisms, to absorb advice, and to act on it. So I will leave it there.
All right. Now, how do you address the huge numbers of people leaving Fiji? Some 4,000 odd have come to Australia to pick fruits, for example. From figures I read, 400 plus doctors and nurses have migrated for greener pastures. Is there any government policy being mooted to increase jobs in Fiji, to retain skilled workers with better pays and incentives, sir?
Sachi, that's a big challenge for us. Globally, post-COVID, there's been a huge labor market restructuring. Australia, New Zealand, and many other countries have developed this huge appetite. Fiji, when we look at our growing economy, the strong recovery in the tourism sector and other sectors, we also need additional labor. In fact, we have put in measures in the budget, to train more people at all levels. But we are also reviewing our existing immigration laws and legislations, to ensure that we facilitate, if our employers need labor from outside of Fiji. In fact, a very important decision that the government has already made, Sachi, and this is very important for our diaspora, that every descendant of a former Fiji citizen will now no longer need a permit, even if you don't have a Fiji passport. So, for example, if you have a Australian passport and you don't have a Fiji passport, you want to come to Fiji, live here, work here, reside here, do business, you don't need to have a Fiji passport. You don't need to have a permit. All you have to prove to the immigration is that you are a descendant of a former Fiji citizen. And so that has already been decided, announced by the Honorable Minister for Home Affairs. And we want to make sure that we get, there are a lot of interest from our diaspora to come back, to live here, to work and invest. And we're doing that, but we're also making sure we had this stupid law the previous government had brought that you needed to be in Fiji for 15 years to become a citizen. You don't do that even in Australia. No country in the world requires you to go and live there for 15 years before you get we are going to review that and make it in line with international best practice so that we can also entice people back into the country, and as well as, put in measures to train. As I said, the number of people who left in 2022 is still higher than the number of people that we've lost this year. Because there are two factors at play. One, the economy is going very strongly, so the jobs are being created. And second, we're losing some people, and so those who are staying, and employers can see that, so they are also increasing the salaries and wages. And as I said, salaries and wages in the last 8-9 months have gone up by about 25%, and which is a very positive thing. It's challenging, but it's perhaps sometimes a good problem to have, that it changes the circumstances. The employers understand it, and it's good for the economy and good for our people. But I also want to take this opportunity, Sachin, to thank our diaspora. In fact, there's been a very strong support from our diaspora to the new government. You look at it in terms of remittances, it is all-time high, in terms of the support that we are getting. And I want to say to all of you, we invite you to come. We're doing as much as we can to make these things, easier and better for our people with the newfound knowledge and wisdom and experience, which is going to be valuable for our economy, for our country. We invite them to come back.
Just on that, a very quick one. By the way, we've crossed the hour mark. Would you mind? I've got about a handful of questions left. Would you mind staying back a little while longer?
That's fine, Sashi. I'm at your disposal.
Thank you, sir. You've just mentioned that message to the diaspora about, for instance, traveling with an Australian passport, living and working in Fiji. That's wonderful news. What about those same people traveling on an international passport, a foreign passport, staying, living, working in Fiji? Can they also buy property in Fiji?
Yes, I mean, when I say live, reside, invest, do business, it includes all that.
All right, great. Professor Prasad, what would you say has been the biggest drawback for the coalition government in its first year in existence? You've highlighted some of the positives that you've achieved right from day one. What would be some of the drawbacks?
Well, Sashi, as I said, this is a government that came in post-COVID. We inherited a very, very depressed, economic, situation in terms of our debt, in terms of our fiscal space. We inherited one of the worst ever health services in the country, dilapidated infrastructure. So the fiscal challenge, for a government, for any government, in delivering its first budget was very challenging. And I must say that we managed, from the feedback that we've received domestically, internationally, a budget that has set Fiji back on track, that has set a foundation that will lead to prosperity in the future. And So it's a combination of what we've achieved and the challenges we've faced. The drawback really is that we came into government at a time where we had to deal with not only the depressed economy, but we had to deal with a lot of institutional challenges, that we had promised to remove, which is to bring back genuine democracy at the parliament level, outside of parliament. And we can feel that even the opposition is feeling the freedom in parliament. We have a honorable speaker, with his great, wisdom and knowledge and understanding of democracy and how parliament works. We have a parliament. We actually have a happy parliament. And I want to say this, that we appreciate, the way in which the opposition has so far, handled itself. Because we never saw that before, from both the government side and the opposition. So what I can see is, Shashi, and I think these are things that people do not talk about, how much things have changed for a positive in the last 8 to 9 months, given these massive economic, social, political challenges that we had just before we came into government. And all I want to say to the people is we need a little bit more time. People will have to give us the benefit of doubt. We have said always that we are not going to do everything right all the time. There will be mistakes. And we will be the first one the Prime Minister is the first one. I will be the first one to admit mistakes. And we value people's criticism. We take, the positive aspects of their criticism. But we also condemn the lies, the deceit, the fakery of, those who do not feel that or those who spread the lies before the election and are continuing to spread the lies. We will counter them. We will tell the people what is the truth. But I think there is a lot of positivity, a sense of exuberance and confidence in the country overall, Shashi, despite all the challenges that we have.
You mentioned time. Do you think the coalition government will see out its term of office?
Absolutely. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt. And the Prime Minister is providing an excellent leadership. Obviously, he has his own challenge. Coalition governments, Shashi, are not easy to manage for any Prime Minister and for any leader of a party. And more so in the Fiji context, in the context of how we've come out. People, even if you talk to the supporters of the Fiji First Party, businesses and others, they all feel the sense of freedom. We as a government, we have not been vindictive. We have not run after people. We have brought people. We have kept people who we felt were good. You look at people who are still in important positions, who were appointed by the Fiji First government. So this is a government which is. I mean, people who talk about racial appointments. The Honourable Home Minister in Parliament pointed out that he was ashamed that the police force appointments were skewed to one particular race, the Itoke community. And this happened under the previous government. Those people who were not talking about race before are now talking about race. They're looking at appointments, they're saying, where are the Indo-Fijians? Of course, there are, appointments that have been made. And we may not get everything right all the time, but the Prime Minister and the government is committed to ensuring that we govern for all the people of this country.
You mentioned race, which brings me to a question. How does it make you feel when racially divisive statements such as calling people Vulangis or not recognizing everyone as Fijians as enshrined in the Constitution goes? As an Indo-Fijian, does that make you feel marginalized in some way?
I think that statement by the Prime Minister was totally out of context. The Prime Minister was talking about himself. He went to a function which was the Itoke function, where he said, I was a Bulangi there. Bulangi is a word that, and Bulangi is a word that was used in previous times, previous coups in the context of race. And we would condemn any aspect of its use to divide the people. But the people who never talked about race, some of those, who were part of the previous government, are now seeing everything in race, in terms of race. We are saying, and if they want to talk about that, like the example I gave, the police force appointments and hiring under the previous government was 90% Ethiopians and 10% Indo-Fijians. And this was highlighted by the Minister for Home Affairs. This was done under the previous government. So I think people have to understand that this is a government which recognizes the fact that we are all Fijians. The Prime Minister has said that. The composition of the population, we have to understand all this. We have to look at merit. I mean, people are talking about racially based scholarship. Before the election, Sachi, you know that. There was this campaign that the new government will bring a racist scholarship. We have replaced the TELS loan scheme with a completely neutral, merit-based scholarship. We have return of 650,000. That's not based on race. We're giving $200. That's not based on race. We've given 8.2 million to sugarcane farmers, which are majority of them are Indo-Fijians. We're not talking about race. Government policies have been very, very clear about helping our people regardless of who they are. Okay, when there are some appointments made, an Indo-Fijian is appointed or a Itoke is appointed or more Itoke is appointed, that does not mean that the government is practicing, a racist agenda. I think those who want to stretch that beyond their imagination are becoming racist themselves.
All right, I'll leave that there. Coming to the final tape, as they say, finishing line, as the Minister responsible for finance, strategic planning, national development, what is the road ahead for Fiji in economic terms? Can you share some positivity out there for the public?
Very good, important last question, Sashi. As I said, the economy is on the cusp of good growth. We have revised our growth forecast, initial growth forecast from 6 to a conservative 8%. I'm told by my advisors that it could be more than 8%. Tourism industry has the strongest growth. We are back to more than what we were experiencing in 2019. Investment lending has increased. The labor market is very strong. The salaries and wages have increased by 25%. There is a sense of, determined international engagement from our development partners, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, EU, India, US, EU. There is a heightened engagement and there is a lot of support coming for this government. We have allocated good funding for education, health, agriculture. Resource sectors are a bit of a challenge right now, but everything that I see as Minister for Finance, as an economist, points to a good future for Fiji. But we have a lot of challenges as well. We have to review a lot of the laws, the legislations. We have to get our civil servants to understand that this is a new government, that there are new imperatives. The speed at which we can do some of these things will be a challenge. But Sashi, I see a lot of confidence. And as I said, I use the word exuberance, a sense of exuberance. I was in Lambasa yesterday, at a function, and then in the evening, I met a group of farmers. The level of confidence, the level of rethinking that is going on shows that these are people who are not influenced by, the lies and deceit that some, would like to spread about the new government.
Professor Prasad, you said that was my last question. It wasn't. I have two more questions for you. First one, is totally a very simple one. What is your brief Diwali message to my viewers as we head to Diwali next weekend?
As I was the Prime Minister and I were at a function on Friday, and the Prime Minister said that Diwali is a triumph of good over evil. Diwali is a triumph of light over darkness, triumph of knowledge over ignorance. All I want to say to everyone, including all our people who would be celebrating Diwali in Australia, New Zealand, and in all other countries, this is an exciting time for us here in this country. There are challenges that this government has, but on this occasion of Diwali, I want to say that we will work very hard. I forgot to say, Sashi, one of the key achievements that we brought right, was this idea of reconciliation. The government has passed a motion to establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and Diwali's message would be fitting, in terms of bringing people together. Diwali is no longer a occasion restricted to a particular community. It's a whole national celebration, and people enjoy Diwali as light over darkness. And I wish everyone a very, very happy Diwali and a prosperous New Year.
Professor Prasad, I thank you for that. And finally, sir, your views on today's SSTP program and any concluding remarks.
Shashi, as I said, I want to thank both you and Nikhil. I think it's a pleasure to be back on your show again, and you provided a very, very independent, well thought out platform for everyone. Those who chose not to participate at that time, it's for them to think about it. But I hope that we will all use SSTP as a platform whenever we feel it is important and necessary, and whenever you invite, because it is important for us to, and as a government, we've been open to the media here. In fact, the media in Fiji now feels free. Government has always been open. I know journalists have come to my office and said, we never thought we would be able to come into the finance minister's office and ask questions. So that's the level of freedom that we have provided. And I want to thank you for fighting, to provide that platform and freedom when we were in opposition. So big Binaka Bakelevu, and thank you.
Professor Prasad, thank you very, very much for your participation today. A big Vinaka Bakalevu to you, sir. Dhanavad. And I will reiterate what I said right at the beginning. I only hope that you can encourage some of your cabinet colleagues, just about everyone is a minister or an assistant minister, to participate in this program. We don't hit below the belt. We may ask some hard questions, but it's a way of telling the public of Fiji what each minister's portfolio is about, what programs they have in their calendar, the good, the bad, and the ugly of their position. I hope you can take that invitation to your cabinet, sir.
Thank you, Shashi.
Thank you very much for participating in episode 52. I say have a wonderful day. God bless you, sir. Thank you. All right. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have the Deputy Prime Minister as our chief guest today. I hope you've enjoyed the program. But Nikhil Singh is back with us. Nikhil, what has been the highlight of today's interview with Professor Biman Prasad for you?
Sashi, I'll probably start by saying the biggest positive is that Professor Prasad actually accepted the invite to come on the show. We've had challenges, as you know, inviting guests last year, and there was a blanket, well, we didn't get a response, but we take it as a blanket no from the then government, but for Professor Biman Prasad, being the Deputy Prime Minister, to be on the program as we reactivate SSTP, I think that's a positive for me, the highlight.
Well, that has been the hallmark of the man. In the past, whenever I've extended an invitation to him, he has always come forth and always willingly said that he'll accept that invitation. And as I said, that's huge credit to Professor Prasad. Now, you've been following the comments of viewers during the live broadcast. Any noteworthy comments that you'd like to share?
Sashi, there's been well over 100 comments, but I was monitoring and just trying to sync it with your questioning or your questions to the guest today. I note that you asked about VAT or value-added tax, a very direct question. It went to whether a promise was broken or not. We had a viewer, Rizwan Hussein, who said that is not the answer to the question. So I think there was a lot of explanation, but did we get a clear answer as to whether the promise was broken or not? According to one viewer, that question was not answered. You spoke about austerity measures. One viewer, Rahul Chan, said revenue and suffering both have increased. You went on to talk about the state of economy. We had Vinod C. Gupta. He congratulated Professor Biman and said, thank you for very effective financial managers, for being financial managers. Interestingly, there's a lot of comments about the overseas travel, and Litiana Wangalevu said, wow, after almost 1 year in office and the 3,000 PM allowance still exists, despite many criticisms from the coalition government. No wonder food are still expensive as the bills for these ministers are so high. So there's a lot of interest generated with the question about overseas travel. The last one that I noted, Sashi, is about your question on the army. And Pran Rathod said, army just can't be interfering at all the time. Why can't they sort out with line minister rather than going public? We need to get rid of this army fear. So those are some of the comments that I have noted, Sashi.
On the comment of that, I think given the subject matter, it's we could spend an hour and a half just talking on that itself. So with all due credit to our chief guest, he did answer in his own way. On the subject that you mentioned, the comment about the per diem that I raised, credit to the professor. He did say that that is going to be reviewed. The PM has asked for it to be reviewed. So there's some positivity there as well. Did you get a sense of the mood of the people from the comments that you've been reading?
Look, I think there is a lot of, attention to the cost of living in Fiji, Sashi. That came out quite clearly. So that remains front and center of people's minds back home, back in Fiji. So I think that's an issue that will continue to dominate, if you like. With the explanation given by our guest today, there are measures being taken, and the relief that's been provided in the way of social welfare and so forth. The increasing budget to education, but I think cost of living is front and center of people's minds.
I agree with that, because that's the sense of direction I got over several weeks. And last week, when I put out a question as to what is the question was what affects you most, something to that effect, and cost of living really came out. Now I notice our good friend Rakesh Prasad and his wife Saris are watching from Saigon in Vietnam. They're traveling. And I also noticed someone from Canada was tuned in today as well. Did you notice that?
I did. There's people from all over the world, Sashi. I mean, this is SSTP. We bring you a program that delivers the answers that people are after. So it is the Thinking People's program.
Well said, Nikhil. Now, any closing comments from you?
I think we started off with a really good guest today, Sashi, and I hope that the message that was relayed to Professor Biman today goes back to the other coalition partners. It'll be wonderful to have some of the other government representatives, whether it be the Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister Kavoka or any other ministers, because there's lots to talk about, policies, almost 1 year in office now. A lot of questions about how they will deliver on certain promises that have not been fulfilled as yet. So I do wish to see more of the government representatives in our program.
In fairness to the coalition government, Nikhil, people, I mean, it's a natural tendency. People have this tendency to expect everything all at once. It's a long-term process to provide. The Fiji First government were in power for 16 long years, and to dismantle a number of measures brought by them or institutions to tackle a lot of economic-related problems, it needs time, it needs dedication, and I think this Minister for Finance, not that I speak for him, I think he's been working very, very hard. And also seemed to me that being in government, it was a very polished Professor Prasad today, where he could speak with authority. There was no worry about previous times where FICAC was sort of breathing down your neck. And it was, to me, it was a very polished performance by the Deputy Prime Minister. What do you say?
I agree, Sashi. I think that that culture of fear is slowly fading, where you one would think that you get, one of the better word, FICAT, if you said something that was not palatable to the government of the day. But I think, Sashi, the other important aspect is that all governments must be held to account. I think it'll be really, really encouraging, and it will be really good to see some of the opposition members coming on this program and holding the government to account. I know the Fiji Labour Party, while they're not in Parliament, they held their annual delegates conference yesterday. There's a number of resolutions that was passed that goes to holding the government to account, and probably have more to say on that in the next program. But this is the platform that they have, and I hope to see the opposition on this as well.
Well, Nikhil, between you and I, one thing we're not good at is keeping time. We said it was going to be an hour-long program, and it's just on an hour and a half. Nikhil, I thank you very, very much for being part of the SSTP program today. I wish you have a wonderful week. Cheerio to you. And we don't know who's up next.
We don't, Sashi. We've gone over an hour. I will adjust the invoice and send it to you.
Well, yeah, it will be sitting in my inbox, that's for sure. Thank you very much, Nikhil. Have a wonderful day. Have a great week. Cheers.
Thank you, Sashi. You too.
Well, SSTP, we ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. As I say, Fijians want to know. That's it for episode 52, ladies and gentlemen. To my SSTP team, thank you for today's episode. I must also thank you, our viewers, for watching the program today, and to our chief guest who graced the occasion today in our comeback show. I thank all those viewers who've taken time to provide their positive feedback with regards to the program. Thank you for the likes and the emojis, even the angry emojis I accepted. And especially to those who have sent stars, thank you very much as well. You are what makes this platform a success. So, look, as I said, we don't know who our guest is. We're not going to promise you we'll be back next Sunday. We'll take things as they come. Watch the SSTP page for future announcements. And if we are not back on Sunday, we wish you a very happy Diwali and take care. In closing, I'll leave you with this quote from Alan Moore, who said, "People shouldn't be afraid of their government. Governments should be afraid of their people. People shouldn't be afraid of their government. Government should be afraid of their people." That quote from Alan Moore. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for episode 52 today. Till the next program, I am Sashi Singh, bidding you goodbye, namaste, and ni samode. Goodbye, world.